Okay, it's 6:30. Out of respect for everybody's time, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
I move we approve the agenda.
Hold on a second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay. The approval for the minutes of November 13th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, is there a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right. We're gonna go ahead and get an update from the Wichita Fire Department.
Good evening, my name's Matt Bowen. I run out of Firehouse 2. Our battalion's a little bit spread out, so Firehouse 7 and Firehouse 3 on North Broadway, and we're unfortunately having a battalion. I think normally either Station 7 or Firehouse 1 battalion, one covers. So it's been a little bit since I've been in. I've been with the department 32 years. And you know, it's an honor to be a part of the Wichita Fire Department and serve our community. I have handouts over on the table, and I think all the representatives have a copy of it. So at the very top of it has the breakdown of runs, and this is from September through November. Normally, I like to break it down compared to the previous year and stuff. We just received, or this program just got up and running again here. So you have 3 months worth of calls. District 6 is busy. It's second busiest for fire calls within the city. So crews do a great job. Thing about it is Wichita has lots of fires. Make lots of calls. One thing that's gonna happen, if the bridge is reopened, is the temporary station of Firehouse 23 is, after the first year, it's gonna be taken out of commission. One thing positive, out of that though, we're getting Squad 7 back at Firehouse 7. So I'm gonna go over some of the WFD news. On the 7th early morning hours, one of our most recent apartment fires, fire crews rescued a young lady from her apartment. It's 3-level and what we call a garden, which means half of the first floor is underground. So crews were able to they were directed by a bystander on scene on roommate in there that they were targeted first and pull that occupant out. And she was transported into critical condition, but they had her out within 6 minutes of Firehouse 5 arriving on scene. Firehouse 5 was first due. This was on the East Ninth. So our fire duty at apartment buildings seems to pick up this time of year a little bit. And there's multiple safety messages back here. I'm going to stress one of them to all of you, and I hope you share the message with your family and friends. But right now, we have 12 fire recruits in Academy at 31st and Oliver, where our regional training center is. We anticipate those 12 recruits graduating on the 19th of January and getting assigned their firehouses and starting on the 20th of January. So we're excited to see them start their careers. We just had 4 members come back from out from Wisconsin. They did the final inspection on 1 truck company and 2 pumpers up there, and we look to have them in service late January, early February. And thank you, Councilwoman Ballard. I understand on the 5th you voted, and we have 5 more pumpers getting ready to be ordered. So we're excited about it. That's really going to help our fleet and the continuity of good services we provide. Also, with that approval was final go ahead on a new global transit center. We appreciate their very much, and both the pumpers and that building store I want to mention our Kansas Firefighters Museum, old engine company 6 at, well, actually 1300 South Broadway. It is, it's been a labor of love for our retired members from the department, surrounding communities, and restored the old firehouse. Amazing museum. It's open 11 to 3 every Saturday. Recently, we had a retired member, Chief Bobby Wolf, who retired about 10, 12 years ago. He passed away, and the memorial was for Kansas Firefighters Museum, and the Kansas Firefighters Memorial is also there. And so far, the retirees at 12,000 donated in memorial for Chief Bobby Wolf. So he left a lasting legacy for our department. Next page is just some fire pictures from recent house fires within the city. Both of these were, one was board up and one was a vacant. Significant fire crews did really good. Third page, I have pictures of both engine 15, engine 22, and truck company 7. They'll be going in service early next year. And I have a whole bunch of safety messages on this handout, but the number one safety message I want to pass on, and every time I interact with the public and community, I talk about our community risk reduction has a close before you dose program. And what that is when you go to bed at night, something as simple as closing your bedroom door will buy you unbelievable amounts of time. Your Wichita Fire Department, we very aggressive on our searches. Oh, sorry, I was getting ahead of you. But this is just facts and information, and what something as simple as closing the door do to help you and protect your children, your family. I've seen it within my career where you've had a bedroom door, bathroom, hall. You have complete burnout of those adjacent rooms, but that simple bedroom door will barely be any smoke staining in that bedroom. So what happens, our department, if your house is on fire, all the doors, all the windows are on fire except for one, we're gonna take that window, we're gonna do a targeted search, and we're gonna evaluate if we can enter, we're gonna enter that room and get a primary search. That's why you buy us to the fire trucks, that's why we train as hard as we do. Our number one priority is life safety, and that's your life safety, our life safety. Number two is to control the situation, and our third priority is property conservation. But don't look at anything else. Please read this, please share this with your family members, loved ones, because something as simple as closing the door. I'm open for any questions from.
I have a question.
I was just curious, do you,
Yes.
I remember when I was a kid, even in training us, you know, to be the ones in the
Yes.
family to be aware and what to do if there is,
And
and have a plan and escape.
yes, and exit drills in the home. Absolutely, and yeah. So with that, they used to be called POW boxes, practicing them. And I hired on in 91, and we do station tours. Prevention week, we had these nice boxes that simulated a bed, and we'd teach them, we had a runner, a carpet, we'd teach kids to lay on the carpet, crawl under the little curtain we had simulating smoke, go to the door, put their hand on the door, and, see if it's hot, and open it if it wasn't hot. What we're telling you to do now, forget that. Go to the window. If your door is closed, your fire alarm's going on. More than likely, all that toxic environment is outside your door. You open that door, you're letting it into that place. It's got cleaner, fresher air. Keep the door closed. Teach your kids to break out a window. Even if they're second floor, we carry unbelievably wide variety of ladders on our truck companies. Every single fire truck has at least 2 ladders on it, except for our pickups or quad companies. Above grade, we'll throw ladders, but don't open the door if your house is on fire. You know, you bet, you bet. Yes, sir.
Well, for one, love this and would love to dive into this display
You bet.
at another meeting. But with the temporary station closing at 13 and West, last month it was mentioned that one's fairly busy and the response times in my neck of the woods at the northwest side, 13th and McLean, those are cutting it pretty close to the sort of falling out of the best practice for response times outside of that 4 to 6 minutes.
1710.
Yeah. I was wondering if there would be, after that firehouse closes, will that be retested with the bridge open to see if we're within that, or?
The white paper that was prompted, and the Leverum data program, a recommendation was, and I'm not sure if it's still in the draft stage or not, it's with Mr. Manager. And to be honest, I don't know where it's at. It made some recommendations for us to meet NFPA national standards, which is 1710. We were gonna have to relocate the fire. I'm not sure if
Still the
it's been
case.
privy to that report. It's pretty dramatic.
I wish they would talk about it a little bit more in a public setting, because it has some pretty interesting information, and a little scary, to be honest. Like,
Yes.
we're several stations behind. 2 of them need to be relocated in our district and 1 additional. So
Yes.
the station that we would need to add, they're recommending is at 13th and Sheridan, which is just not too far from where Don's is, and which is hilarious because 20 years ago, they moved 13th and St. Paul to 21st and Coolidge. So it's kind of interesting that they're wanting to move it back.
And again, that's my
Yeah.
and I know that, I know what the recommendation to me in the PA 1710 is. And, you know, it is extensive. It's about a 230 page study on all the data and what it takes for us to become compliant. So that industry best practice. So that is the city manager and council, and I don't know where it's at. Not that I don't have better answers than that.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the answer on the report. You might, you think you have meetings.
Appreciate that. Any other questions? Any questions from? Okay, Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
Folks, have a good evening.
I don't think the police department meeting has tonight, so let's go over to our library update.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sarah Field with Utah Public Library. Few updates tonight. So earlier this year, we asked the public to submit drawings for our new library cards. So we're in the second phase of that to choose the final selections. So we're going to add 3 new library cards this winter. And right now, we're asking the public to vote on those. So you can go to wichitalibrary.org/card design. There's also going to be some social media posts about it too. So depending on what platform you follow, you can go and see what those pictures are. There's some really cute ones. And then there's also some just general, not so cute ones. That's just a little more plain. But yeah, that's a really interesting offering that we haven't had before, to let the public choose what they want to carry around in their wallet. So it's nice to have the community give us their designs and then also let our customers choose what they want. So that's really exciting. We're coming up to winter break, and so while kids and teens are out on the break, they are going to be able to participate in lots of fun programming. You can go onto our events page, wichitalibrary.org/events. There's gonna be a lot of fun stuff around the system. Here at Evergreen, where I do youth programming, we're gonna have a Mario Kart program on the 27th. We're going to have 22nd, I'm going to tear the wall down, and we're gonna bring all of our big new blocks in here, and it's called Imagination Playground, where children get to build their own playgrounds with these dynamic foam blocks that aren't very heavy, but are very durable. We've done it about 4 or 5 times, and they love it. It's so much fun. You can bring your littles all the way up to your teenagers. It's just, they bring their imagination and they build what they like. And then, as I mentioned, you can go onto our website and see what's going around the system. And one final thing to note, if you've been following social media, you have seen that our book bus has hit the streets. And that is a great service that we are now providing to fill those service gaps that we have where we don't have library locations. Racine Sakula is our family literacy coordinator, and she's our driver of the book bus. And so some of the things that she can do with her bus is she can issue library cards. She can, she has a small collection where folks can actually browse and check out. And then they can return materials if they don't want to get down to their local branch and they see her. They can return their materials there. And she also has a hotspot so they can connect to Wi-Fi. So a lot of awesome services. It's outfitted. It was one of the paratransit vehicles. So it's a shorter, bus, but it's very cute. It's got books all over it, and she's been having a ball driving around doing that. There's a complete list of all of her stops at wichitalibrary.org/bookbus. But if you also use one of our self-check machines, all of her stops are programmed as events. And you can see she does morning and afternoon drops. Usually it's about 2 hours a segment, but she's going all over town with this awesome vehicle. And it's been really great because it's been a while since we've had a bookmobile. So as you had mentioned, Maggie saying, something left and came back, so has the bookmobile. So if you're interested in coordinating with her, she does take requests and she takes her bookmobile to special events. So feel free to reach out to her. If you go onto the website, you can see more information about that, but it is part of our outreach umbrella. Do I have any questions from the chat?
So it's like extension of library loans. You can reserve a book online and have it delivered to your.
I don't know if she's actually initiating holds like we do with our customers. She's just gonna have a rotating special collection that's outfitted for the book bus. So if you're wanting to request a pickup, you still have to, do that through your local library branch. But the benefit is that if you're just out in the community and you have a library card or you don't, she can issue a card and you can borrow right then and there. Most of the collection is targeted toward children. And she mentioned to me the other day that she started collecting food and also resources that she can hand out, like toothbrushes or things like where she sees a need. And we've talked about maybe having some of our teen volunteers or our TAB members that are teens do certain drives where they can pull in resources and then she can distribute those to those folks too. So it's got a lot of potential and we're really excited about it. And she loves driving it, so. Yeah. Any more questions?
Okay, yeah. Sure.
Along those lines, I was just curious, does the library support the little libraries or is that a completely different initiative?
So we have some, but not all. In District 3, I believe we did put in 26 this year. And you can go onto our website. I think it's also on the outreach page, but you can see a map of where each of them are located. Some are in front of businesses, some are in front of residential homes, some of them are in parks. And so we do have a collection where we supply books for those. In different districts, there are other organizations that have put them up and they're responsible for maintaining those too. One thing that's really interesting about ours is that they have a literacy component, but they also have an audio component. So each one, as I mentioned, is 26 as a letter. So you can push a little button in the little library and it tells you, this is the letter F. And these are 3 or 4 words that start with the letter F. And also we're putting in a lot of our promotional material for parents. So folks that need a little bit more support when they're trying to teach literacy to their children, they can find that information in there too.
How do those get funded? And are there ever opportunities for private partners to donate to that?
So I think with that one in particular, it might have been a United Way grant. I might be mistaken, but we did get a grant and it was targeted toward that district. And then we did have a partnership with WSU Tech because they actually fabricated it and then painted it, and then Parks and Rec helped install it. So it's multifaceted, yeah, because a lot of them are on city property. So if you're interested, I would definitely say reach out to Racine, because as I mentioned, she's the family literacy coordinator, and she also can speak to higher ups who are in the process of always looking for opportunities to push literacy out in the community. Yeah. Anything else?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the library also have volunteers with the library as well, around maintenance, places?
Right, yeah, so that's definitely an opportunity that we've been recruiting for. I don't know if we actively have someone right now, but I know that anytime we have volunteer opportunities, we promote those on our website or social media. And some of them are really specific, like, how comfortable do you feel, driving around with the book bus? Or how comfortable do you feel wearing our Webster, mascot costumes, that sort of stuff. So yeah, with her position in particular, she is trying to recruit a team of volunteers to help do that. Because in addition to all of the driving around that she does, she also is committed to doing all of our outreach for our youth too. A lot of it, not all, but a lot of it. So yeah, if you go to our website, under the About section, there's a volunteer opportunities tab, and you can see what's available. And if that's still available, you can apply. Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Right, we are now at the public agenda. This is an opportunity for anyone who wants to speak on any item that is not part of the agenda. So far, we don't have any scheduled items. If there's anybody present who wants to speak on an item that is not already in the agenda, this is their opportunity. And there is a 3-minute limit for each speaker. Do we have anybody present who'd like to speak on this portion of the agenda?
Emila?
No.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up.
Looks like we don't have any off agenda items. Councilmember Ballard, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to new business, the retaliatory eviction ordinance.
Thank you, Councilmember Ballard. Not a whole lot new for you, I suppose. Maybe the third time you've heard some of this, but thank you, everybody, for having me here. My name's Nate Johnson. I'm with the Law Department of the City of Wichita. We put together a draft retaliatory eviction ordinance. I will note just kind of upfront, it's not only about evictions, but about all types of retaliation that a landlord might engage in. We just try to, this will be a theme throughout my presentation here today, try to track state law, state headings, things like that. So we can maybe find some space to deal with an issue in Wichita while trying to manage some somewhat restrictive state laws on the issue of landlord-tenant relationships. And this kind of came forward. We've had a workshop with City Council about this, and maybe sorry, it's not.
It's not.
We can maybe, yes. Okay, appreciate that. Sorry, they should have practiced before. So we've kind of been developing some different ideas to deal with fair housing issues throughout the city. Tried to meet with different people, come up with ideas within this framework that I've been alluding to. And what we've come up with is a retaliatory eviction ordinance that just top level tries to add some fines to the activity that's already prohibited under state law, adding some more teeth to that situation and maybe trying to make a dent in some of the problems that are facing in the city. This has been developed through a few different kind of reports that we have. It's kind of hard to find evidence, and there's been some local news articles about this very issue. Hard to find really hard data, strong evidence about retaliatory evictions just because of the way landlord-tenant relationships are made up. It's hard for someone maybe to make a claim of retaliatory eviction, which is why we tried to potentially have a solution to maybe address this issue at least a little bit. But we have reports through our through our neighborhood inspections division, housing code complaints, and oftentimes we do see substandard conditions at places. And sometimes maybe there are retaliatory actions that occur because of the housing code complaint. There might also just be a complaint to the landlord, and that's the situation that we're dealing with. If we have substandard living conditions or concern about what we call habitability, then what is the landlord going to do? And if there's some sort of retaliatory action that occurs, that's what we're trying to get at. There's 3 different ways that it usually kind of happens. Retaliatory eviction is kind of the one we think about the most, evicting someone for complaining because of a code issue or habitability issue. But that also might include increasing rent, making it more difficult for somebody to live there. It might also include diminishing services. That's the other category that we look at a lot too. Decreasing utilities, like making it more difficult to access electricity, water, things like that as well. The reports do vary by council district, as we've sort of found through our meetings with council members and through the district advisory board process. But there has been kind of a consistent recommendation through our regular meetings with people. And we've been kind of doing this over the past year, looking at a lot of different options. And one is a retaliatory eviction ordinance. We go to the next slide, please. I'll try to be more consistent with you now too. Sorry about that. So we tried to base this off a model that's used in the city of Topeka, but I say model, there aren't really other cities that have pursued this exactly. But trying to use maybe that momentum to consider it in the city of Wichita as well. So state law, as I mentioned, I'll kind of give a little bit of background on that, governs the issue of retaliatory evictions. When I say govern, there is a specific statutory section that deals with that issue. And when we've got a really comprehensive state law or a real specific statutory provision in state law, it does make it a little more difficult sometimes for municipalities to enter into that area. If it's, governed by state law is a little superior to municipal law, but we can add things to it. We can try to supplement what's going on, and that's what we try to do here. But that means we kind of need to understand, what the state law says. We work with it. It says a landlord may not retaliate with that increased rent, diminished services after a habitability complaint. Habitability are, again, just the broad swath of issues that could come up that make a place uninhabitable. Livability is another term we use. They're kind of squishy legal terms, not super broad in that it doesn't apply to every situation. It's super fact dependent a lot of times. But what we're looking at are when a landlord retaliates because of habitability complaints. Another thing that's included in there and is tracked in the proposed ordinance that we have, the draft language that we have together, is if there's organizing in a tenants union as well. And that's another component, another trigger under state law that we include. The only thing that's offered to tenants under state law, though, is a defense to eviction. So if your landlord's trying to evict you, you can raise that in the eviction case as a tenant if you can prove that and stop the eviction potentially. Also, you can seek actual damages if you raise a counterclaim against your landlord or bring another suit. It just that can be really difficult because maybe you're dealing then with a landlord who's willing to retaliate. So it's hard maybe to get that process going. There's not really other protections that are available for tenants under state law or penalties for landlords. That's kind of the piece there that's at the bottom. And that does create kind of a real difficult situation because it is kind of a difficult thing to prove a lot of times. And a landlord is still allowed, even after a habitability complaint, to evict for, say, non-payment of rent. Or if there is another good faith legitimate reason to evict someone, even if it occurs after a habitability complaint, there's still a basis for a landlord to evict. So state law does really, it's arguable what the balance is, but at least try to kind of balance the idea that a landlord sometimes needs to evict people, but there are situations of retaliation that maybe we should address too. Now, our concern is maybe, thank you, that there's not a whole lot of necessarily a whole lot of positive force for the tenant in that situation, which is what this proposed ordinance looks at. So we're looking to maybe institute fines for a conviction in municipal court based on a retaliatory eviction. We use similar definitions as state law to like identify and define what the landlord-tenant relationships are. If anybody's kind of like a legal nerd, you'll maybe note that like at state law, there's Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, and then there's also one for manufactured and mobile homes. But for our purposes, we're just keeping it as one kind of tenant. So the same rules will apply otherwise, and that's kind of actually how it works out in practice at the state level as well. But we also try to clearly identify the actions that are not retaliatory. And that's kind of the big issue we see potentially with state law. If we try to infringe or pull away some of the powers that specifically identified for a landlord, such as a good faith basis for eviction or increasing rent, then we're going to have some trouble with state law is kind of our view. So we try to at least identify what the actions would be that are not retaliatory by the landlord. Next slide, please. This is kind of the big change too from Topeka. In the Topeka one that was passed or instituted in July of this year, there's not really any kind of process for evaluating complaints that are made against the landlord, which maybe could have some benefits. We were just worried, like, how would we sort of figure out which complaints are legitimate and how would we manage our own resources at the same time and figure out a way to do that. Fortunately, we kind of have a process in place in the city for administratively reviewing criminal-ish kind of complaints, even though we're only talking about fines here, and that's through our non-discrimination ordinance. It has a pretty detailed, and I've tried to lay out here, I won't go through everything and specifically, though, please ask me if you've got any questions about that process, but it's a very detailed process that sets out how long you have to file a complaint. We put forms together for folks so we know what we're looking for. There's an evaluation by the law department to see if there's probable cause, like if it actually is kind of a retaliatory eviction, or maybe there was a good faith basis for an eviction or increased rent, and try to evaluate that first, but otherwise set it up so there's mediation opportunities as well. Then it goes through municipal court if that doesn't work out. And I'll be honest, this might create some difficulty for folks who are facing eviction in the short term. We can't necessarily resolve that issue, but it's trying to provide another opportunity for a tenant who's facing a retaliatory eviction to at least raise the claim and have that heard by a municipal court judge who would act as an administrative judge in this instance. Landlords can still appeal to district court just like with every other municipal court judgment as well. That's sort of a legal technicality since we're just municipal court. They can take it across the street still to the district court, but again, having an opportunity for a tenant to at least make their case, we think could be a positive thing. And next slide, which is sort of the big piece of this. And I will note on this as well, you may see in the draft ordinance that the fines are a little bit lower. That was a mistake on our part presenting it to council, but we are recommending the fine structure that's listed here, $250 at minimum for a first conviction, up to $1,000, and then the minimum goes up to $50. It goes up $500 on the maximum side as well. There's been a lot of question about the amount and whether that's sufficient to create deterrent effect or something that's positive for tenants in this situation. But that, and you know, I'm really here too. I should have said up top, my apologies, just everybody's sort of view on this, what comments we have, if you've got thoughts about what the fine level should be, the administrative process, whether that's too much, too little. That's kind of what I'm here to hear about today too. And so it's escalating penalties, and really it's kind of, the idea here too is to look at habitual offenders and really try to add some teeth to that situation. The other thing too is, and it's kind of an inherent part of this structure, it's if a tenant is able to get a municipal court judgment finding retaliatory eviction or some sort of retaliation by the landlord, that also may make it easier if they face eviction over in district court too. So municipal court has to listen to district court. We can't just wipe out state law judgments or evictions or things like that because it happens at the state level or whatever. But we can do things to maybe, again, provide avenues for folks to prove retaliation that then can deter landlords, fines, things like that, that also benefit by just having a legal document that has that finding for tenant area. And just I have a couple other pieces here just at the end too, but we've kind of evaluated the cost of this. It's probably not going to be too much. The main cost would be if we have a lot of folks asking for mediation. The city's saying that it will pay for that. It's about $750 per, but we don't have a lot of those situations. I'm going to be honest. Usually if someone's filing a complaint for something like retaliation, similar to under the non-discrimination ordinance, it's kind of hard to find middle ground without an evaluation. That's kind of how we got to that point. We also expect if they, gets to municipal court, things like fines help offset the cost of going through court and the resources that will come from the city to make sure that process exists as well.
So,
And I was about done with what I had, so that's perfect time. Yeah, thank you.
just to make sure I've seen it all clearly, so would something like this suspend the eviction process?
And that's, no.
No.
And that's kind of, that's really, because eviction is a power that's granted more by state statute. So we can't say a landlord cannot pursue eviction. That's kind of our view in the law department. It's really hard to just take away eviction authority because that's basically a property right.
Well,
of the
if you
landlord.
suspend it until this was resolved.
I understand, and we'll look into that more too, it's just, again, it's like. Under state law, the eviction process not only happens like, as a normal limited civil action, but they have specific timelines for eviction actions. So a district court, that's what makes it kind of tricky. There's a special chapter 61 section about evictions that says, after an eviction petition is filed, it has to have an initial appearance before the court within 14 days. And then trial has to occur within 14 days after that. So there are weirdly specific and quick timelines for eviction already set in state.
But there's options to change state law.
For sure. It's just not as much, not as much within the city's purview.
Right, but
Yeah.
if they knew how it could be the most helpful.
For sure, and I will say this is part of a broader project to, I've worked with some council members who are trying to do exactly that, trying to maybe use the experiences in Wichita and information we have to push changes at the state law level as well. Yeah, for sure. It's just not as directly within our control. Yes.
So could you just speak to the, I know you sort of started off that this was difficult to quantify, but how many retaliatory evictions are there in the city directly related to a complaint by a tenant about the condition of the property?
I don't really have a great answer for that.
Okay.
And especially a specific number, and the question, it's kind of hard because if someone's been evicted, then it's kind of hard to say it was retaliatory after the fact.
Well, right, it's like that sort of
Yeah.
the business model, it just seems, I'm just trying to understand as a landlord where my motivation is not to take your rent. Like whether you're complaining about me or not.
For sure.
Like if you're paying your rent,
Mhm.
bird in hand, right? If you're not paying your rent and you're complaining.
In that situation is still, you can still evict in that situation.
Right, so I guess I'm trying to get to that, my point is.
Yeah.
What's the real angle here? Like what's the problem we're actually trying to solve? If we don't actually know what the problem is, what are we trying to get at?
And I would say the fact that there's not data just does not mean that we haven't seen evidence of that.
Okay.
Basically, so. There's a few different ways that we've kind of collected information. So we've worked with our neighborhood inspections group through code enforcement, basically, the county city collaborative project there. And we've tried to, the best that we can try to do is see situations where someone has complained, we stay in touch with them, and then they're evicted. And it's hard to say sometimes whether it was because of the complaint necessarily. But neighborhood inspections doesn't have, again, it's hard to quantify it, but has expressed that as a concern and that they hear it enough that it makes sense to try to act on it. We've also heard a lot of, and I don't want to just say anecdotal because they seem pretty regularly at a lot of particular places around town where we see a lot more.
So you think there's maybe a
retaliatory
mechanism,
eviction.
there's maybe a mechanism then to give you some ability to pursue those specific troublemakers.
Exactly, and I don't want to start like District
I'm all for
One,
that.
yeah, District One, we've heard a lot of reports on it, and District Three as well, seem to be where Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Hoheisel have talked about it quite a bit in our meetings.
I would say the only thing I
yeah.
could add to that is in District 6, we have several apartment complexes that have black mold. And that seems to be a big issue where they complain about it and then get kicked out.
And this starts to get maybe to the business case. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
And this maybe is the business case of it. It just becomes a lot of times maybe we see landlords feel like it's just gonna cost a whole lot more than maybe it would, or they don't want to deal with potential code violations, basically. And we are a complaint-driven system at the city too. So if we don't hear complaints, then a property doesn't really need to come up to code under our system more or less, because we don't have an enforcement trigger for it. So I think that's kind of where the line tries to be drawn to benefit the landlord in that situation that maybe wouldn't otherwise make financial sense.
Perhaps to your point, I think when I was hearing this sounds to me kind of like a part 2 of strict really black mold requirements and
Yeah.
things that were passed a couple of months ago. And so these may escalate as there's stronger protections for folks in situations that aren't habitable. So this is preempting the problem in that, okay, now landlords have to be more, they have to provide better living conditions. And now that they have fire under their ass, they might try and evict people instead.
I got a question, a couple of them.
Yeah.
The communication process, once this, sorry,
Yeah,
if this ordinance, I don't know whether it has or not, if this ordinance is passed, put in effect, what's the communication process for existing or new landlords and tenants?
Yeah, and that, honestly, that's been a big part of this fair housing push on our side, is trying to come up with a much more coordinated way to reach out to people. We rely a lot on housing, and having that information available and trying to incorporate it even into the kind of like workstation, things that exist. Also, though, the city puts on like a housing conference every year. I give presentations there, but we try to connect with everybody and give out that information. We're revamping the landlord tenant handbook and trying to stay really, and we're really trying to make that more accessible at the same time to people as well, really explain things in an easier to understand sort of way. You know, I get a little too legal or whatever sometimes. So trying to make something that's a little more accessible to people and really push that and stay closely connected with our comms department. So whatever social media and related media avenues we have, we get it out there. I will say, I mean, I do a lot of presentations on eviction too. I did eviction defense at legal aid. So it's like, that's been a really, that's the hardest thing, is getting people to really understand or know their right. It's tough. There's a lot of information and a lot going on in everybody's lives all the time, but we understand that is like
No,
the biggest
tell
issue.
us the truth.
That's the biggest issue that we're this overall, I think, that we're facing, is providing information to people that's useful and gets out there and actually makes a dent. So, not to say like we're perfect, we'll take any ideas definitely too, but we're trying to approach it from every avenue.
So my second question, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the qualifications of the entity that will be responding to a landlord's puts to potential increases in rent. And landlords are in business to make money, to make a profit off renting property. And in the event that they have to make substantial improvements, regardless of whether they're code violations or whatever, it's likely going to make a dent. So in the event that there's a decision on the part of the landlord or landlord's entity that they're going to have to increase rent in order to correct the problems, or in the view of the tenant, make it more habitable, how's that going to really be evaluated? I just don't see a judge being able to, unless he's extremely knowledgeable about.
Well, there is a
building costs.
specific eviction court. So, yeah, and this, I will say, this kind of issue does come up a lot beyond even retaliation. And state law says you've got to have a good faith, just in general, like rental increases should be sort of a good faith basis. It can't get that much more specific because every factual situation is so different. But leases also usually spell out more specifically what increases are allowed. So it's, I know every situation is going to be factually very different, but this is not a very uncommon question for eviction court to evaluate, in particular, whether rent was properly raised under the lease. It really is just kind of a contractual interpretation issue at that point. So it can be tricky, but usually, especially entities, larger entities, property management companies have leases that very clearly spell out how that process happens. So, I mean, it saves them legal fees. They have to just, resolve disputes there, but that's usually the lease kind of covers that, but there are also backstop filling rules through state law to determine what a good faith increase in rent is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not cutting anybody off. Okay. I had one before I left. Is it possible to, and I'm thinking of I do communications for a living, so in my thinking about this, is it possible to have some requirement for this in the leasing documents so that every tenant that kind of signs the landlord would be able to have at least on hand? I mean, in theory, they're keeping those in a cabinet somewhere.
That's an interesting, I need to look into that one.
Right.
My initial instinct is not even state law, but maybe like intruding on freedom of contract or whatever. But we also do have those sorts of requirements in other instances. So no, yeah, for sure. I
Or
appreciate
like
that.
a prominent display inside a manager's office, or property manager. That's the thing. The other question, and this is my own 2 cents on these fines, at least in my understanding, there's a lot of quite large landlord, entities in the city. And I know the average rent for a 2-bedroom is in the $700, so they're paying for, if they violate this fine once, then they've got a month and a half of rent for 1 unit. And so this, at least at first sniff, seems a bit low considering how many large structures we have. Now for your mom and pop landlord who has like 1 house on the other side of the city, it would be a bit more of a deterrent, but I think I'm more concerned about the larger places that have more renters.
Yeah, and I'll say that specific issue, I don't have a response per se, but I'll try to, relay that information as best I can, for sure. Thank you.
To kind of piggyback on that, my first impression was, we can argue about whether or not we need this or how we're gonna judge it or anything, but if a landlord is found to be retaliating against a tenant for, let's say, more than a third time, they're obviously not getting that message, and I don't think $1,000 to $2,500 is gonna help that. I think that should be probably significantly higher at the higher end. I can understand, I'm misunderstanding maybe the first time, or I didn't realize this is what that was the second time, but by the time you get to a third and fourth infraction, it
And a lot,
Pattern.
seems like that should probably escalate a little quicker.
because the industry weighing what it's gonna cost to make the repairs against what the fine is.
Just the cost of business.
Wouldn't the repairs have to be made no matter if the tenant's living there or not? I mean,
They're put it off as long as they can.
but if they've made a complaint, would the code enforcement not come and make sure that it's up to code after the complaint's made?
Yeah, and I'll just say code enforcement and tendencies becomes very tricky, just because a lot of times a complaint's made, and by the time we're able to inspect and really respond, maybe the tenant's not even, maybe even moved out, went to a different place, and then the property owner can't allow the person in. Just in general, those happen on different tracks for